Welcome to North Node, the yoga and astrology podcast. I'm Becky, a yoga teacher, astrologist, and businesswoman.
And I'm Laura, founder of Soul Sanctuary Studios, yoga teacher trainer, and wellness coach and consultant. In this podcast, we'll be diving into down-to-earth but deep soul conversations.
We'll explore how you can connect and stay on purpose with your true north alignment through the transformative lenses of yoga and astrology.
Each episode is designed to inspire and guide you on your own journey towards self-discovery, self-love, and personal growth. We'd really appreciate it if you could leave us a 5-star review on your preferred podcast platform. Your support will help us reach more listeners who are looking for insightful discussions and meaningful connection.
Thanks so much for joining us. Now, let's dive into today's episode. So, welcome to this week's episode where we're going to deep dive into Dharma. And some of you might not know what Dharma means as a concept, as a word, but it's a word very much associated with purpose. And I think how we ought to kick off this podcast is to really dive into kind of what we both think purpose is, or maybe what we used to think it was. So yeah, I'd love to hear from you on that, Laura. What do you think?
So, gosh, this has changed massively over the years, like a lot of these concepts meaning have. But I think I used to think that I was on purpose, following this dream of working in the city and all of that. And then realizing that that was me pleasing dad, which may be, and this is where it's so, there's so many layers to it, isn't there? Maybe that was my purpose at that time. But it certainly wasn't, what I would call like my Dharma, like it wasn't my duty. And it's that classic, they say in the Gita, like one of the biggest lessons is better to do your Dharma badly than somebody else's well. And that's what I feel like I was doing. I was living like somebody else's life and, was good at it, on paper, but was miserable and it wasn't me. And I was feeling that in my body, which we've spoken about in previous episodes, like health, etc. So I think purpose for me now is all about trying to feel into what you really want, your true passions, and really being brave enough to follow those. There's another great phrase is like, take chances on dreams that feel crazy to most, but destiny to you. And that's kind of what happened to me. That was like, over 10 years ago when I said to my mum, like, I'm going to be a yoga teacher, I mean, her mouth hit the floor and I think she thought I was, had probably drunk too much at lunchtime or something. Like, the idea of teaching yoga for a living, having come from a corporate background, was pretty bonkers. It's not so bonkers now, which is great, but it really was then. And I was just like, well, I'm going to do it. And I have no idea how I'm going to do it. But having that trust in myself, kind of the trust in the universe too, to go, yeah, I can think I can do this somehow. And it's amazing now. Even last week I had conversations with my mum, like some contracts really pulled off, ironically corporate contracts, but all around wellness and yoga. And I'm, offering to support her any way I can, kind of financially and things like that. And I just said, silly old yoga. And we like laughed at it because that's what we thought about it. And it's like, just really following your passion and like knowing that it's not necessarily going to feel easy, but that it is going to feel right to you. And that's about truth, isn't it? That's about working with your own truth and being really honest with yourself, and being brave in that process. But there's something we talk about in yoga teacher training, which is called the red rubber band. And I do love this concept, but like with anything that you study, as you study it more and more, you realize there's more complexities to it. So this was a great kind of start point for me, which we share on teacher training, which is about the idea that there's a red rubber band and we are all put on this planet for a reason, right? As you said before, the chances of us being here are so slim, the blindfold turtle through the ring. And there is a reason that we've been put here, and we all have a gift. And if we are able to block out the noise and the influence from the external world and really tap into our internal truth, then we could hear what that is and then be brave enough to fulfill that. And if we do that, then we're on path, if you like. And if we start to stray from that, then this rubber band kind of pulls in one direction. And you know, like a rubber band, you pull it to a point and then ping, and it will ping you back on path. And that might look different. Sometimes that might look like an illness, that might look like an accident, that might just look like a coincidence. It might look like something happens where you're just like back on, you know, pulled back on path. And I love this example, a story that we were given on teacher training by one of the participants when we told this, and she was like, "Oh my God, this happened to me." I don't know if you were sat next to me at this point, Beck. So I won't drop any names, obviously, but she was saying how she was working this corporate job and she was really good at it, and she'd been asked to go for the promotion to get the, you know, more senior position, and everything in her bones knew that she didn't want it. Like, yeah, she could do it, but she didn't want it. She didn't like her lifestyle, she was burnt out, all of that. And yet still, she went to the interview and she cycled to the interview. And on the way to the interview, she got knocked off her bike and she ended up in an ambulance. And she's sitting in the ambulance and they're like, you know, testing all her, you know, cognitive ability and all of that. She's going, "It's the red rubber band. It's the red rubber band. I knew I shouldn't be going to this interview." They're probably thinking, "Oh God, she really did get hit on the
Get her
head."
to hospital quick.
Yeah, get her now. But it's this awareness of like, I shouldn't have been doing that, and it's pinged me back on path. The irony of this story is, despite the knowing, she re-went for the interview. She
Mm.
got the interview. She stayed in the job for like, it was like 6 to 9 months or something. Obviously hated it, obviously realized she didn't want to do it, and then left. So just wasted a lot of time, probably learned some lessons along the way and all the rest of it. But why do we put ourselves through it? You know, why do we put ourselves through this, like the head leading the way, um, and the heart being put secondary? But so I guess, you know, there's that idea of dharma, of fate, I guess. But now I see dharma quite differently, which is really about like a duty. So it's not just about fate, but it's about, yeah, we have a duty to do the right thing in this planet and actually to share our gift. Um, and this is a bit of a sideline, but it's something like Tony Robbins. When I went to one of the Tony Robbins events, this is definitely a story for another day. But when I had quite a lot of issues around making money, I thought money was like a bad thing. And that's come from, you know, my dad making money and then getting ill. So I had associated that. And being there with my investor at the time, obviously that was an awkward conversation because he's like, "Well, this isn't going to really work. If you aren't liking money, you're not going to attract it, and I'm investing." So I remember Tony Robbins saying, if you have the ability to make money, you have the moral obligation to make as much money as humanly possible to help as many people as possible. And boom, that like hit me. I'm not saying that's what my duty is. That isn't my duty, is not to make a load of money in this lifetime. What I'm saying is, if you have the ability to fulfill your duty, I think you have the moral obligation to do it because you've been put here for a reason, to help as many people as possible, whatever your gift may be. Some people that might be earning money, other people that might be communicating, it might be spirituality, whatever it is. But you have that duty. Your people out there are waiting for you to share your truth, to help them. And like, who are we almost to get in the way of ourselves on that, you know?
Yeah, I think that's such a good reframe. And yeah, just to touch on the money thing, I think, you know, there can be, especially in the world of spirituality, like a lot of negativity around money. But the truth is, like, good people do good things with money. So the more we can spend our money on, I don't know, like supporting other women in business or buying things from people who are doing things ethically, all of that stuff, like the ripple effect of that is massive. So why would we not want to make shitloads of money and share it?
Help as many people as possible, exactly. Then makes nothing makes me happier. I said this, I can't remember if I said this to you or Emma the other day, but like when chunky invoices hit my inbox from people that I love who have done so much work on themselves. I'm like, can I pay you more? Like, invoice me for something else, because I genuinely love them getting rewarded for the work that they've done. I saw, funny enough, a girl that quit advertising the other day, and she's gone quite out there, and she's living this life in Thailand, doing pretty out there work on terms of feminine intimacy and stuff. And she was selling this course, and I was like, I might just buy the course because I want
Support
to
her.
vote for her. Like, I don't even know what day it is. I don't even care. But I want to support her because that's, you're right, it's our vote. It's what do we believe in and what is right, and having the
Probably a
ability to do.
truer vote. It's probably a truer vote than actually the vote that we get in a way, because that, if you think about the power that money has in the world, it's such a controlling force that if we can redirect our money to, like places that can make a difference, it's going to have a bigger impact than whether you vote like red or blue. So anyway, that's like a whole side. Maybe we need to do an episode about money.
Probably do.
There's so much I could
Um,
talk about.
so come back to Dharma then, back for you. So what does it mean for you?
Well, I think as always for me, like I like to look up the meaning of words and find out. I do this quite a lot with different things, like find out the root of the word, whether that is, a word in the English language. Dharma is a Sanskrit word. And yeah, like as always with any Sanskrit word, you can't directly translate it because Sanskrit is a language that was not meant to be written. There's all that frequency stuff around Sanskrit that it's a feeling and it's much more than the word. But I think one of the words most associated with Dharma in Sanskrit is morality. And, the concept that underpins morality is truth. In yoga, that we call that satya, truth. And it's so that really ties back to the things that you were saying about it being literally our moral obligation to live a life of truth. And we get so lost in truth, what truth really is. We're conditioned to think truth is your obligation to be a good citizen, to show up, to go to work, to pay your taxes, to send your children to school. And I'm not saying those things aren't important, but they're not the truth of who you are. In fact, probably a closer thing to the truth for me is to question those things, like hence all the things that I like to talk about. But we also become disconnected from like the very truth of our being, because we live in this physical world, because we're told money is so important and being this good citizen, we forget. And that's part of like the spiritual oath we take when we choose to be human, to be born, is we forget we're spiritual beings literally having a human experience. And that's a cliche, people are going to have probably heard that, but you've got to stop believing that you're here by accident, that there's not something that is within you that needs to be shared in the world. And that is the feeling that people get, that gnawing in the belly that is like, oh, I'm so dissatisfied. What is that? It's about my purpose. But okay, does that mean I need to change my job? Does that mean I need to have a baby? Or it's because I'm not married or whatever. And those are not your purpose. They might be ways that you can express your purpose, like through your work, through your relationship, through parenting a child. But it's actually more about the truth of who you are overspilling into those areas of life through your way of being. That's what I think purpose is.
And something you've helped me massively with this is my birth chart, and I think this is where the South Node and the North Node become so useful. And obviously, this podcast being the North Node is representative of how important, we feel that is. And so, I mean, you're going to explain this better than me, but essentially, my South Node was about, or is about, shows that in past lives I was a forced caregiver, and that can look like different again, as you say, that could look like lots of different duties. It doesn't matter what form that is in, but the energy was forced caregiving. And that the tiny planet Chiron, it was in there as well, which could, the wounded healer. So that could suggest that maybe I was forced caregiving for somebody with a disability or a child that wasn't my own or whatever it might have been. And yet, in my North Node, it's all about self, right? So moving towards self and communication and being of service. And so for me, the battle is always in how can I continue to be a caregiver and yet move towards self? And so past lives that's come up, and then what happens is in current lifetime, in this lifetime, that wound is stimulated. So the forced caregiver is stimulated, and that gives me an opportunity to complete that karmic cycle. In other words, transform and grow as a human. So I've seen myself fall pregnant with Lenny, being on the coil, and there I am. That wound is being stimulated, that forced caregiving when I wasn't ready for it. Here's a child to look after, when, let's be honest, I didn't really want that at that time. I was focusing on self, I was focusing on career, and then it was like, no, hold on, let's re-stimulate this to help you complete this karmic cycle. I met Adam. Adam had a daughter, so I have a stepchild. So again, forced caregiving, looking after somebody else's child, something that really stimulates that wound in me when I want to move forward onto my purpose, my life purpose. And obviously this isn't going to be the same for everyone. So this is just what's in my birth chart, moving from forced caregiving to like self. And other people, maybe the past life was very self-focused, and actually in this lifetime it's moving more towards caregiving or family, whatever it is. So it's going to look different. But when we have an understanding of what our struggles are going to be, and that they're there to help us complete those karmic cycles and transform and grow as a human being, and know what we're working towards, then that can really help inform our decisions. So it's not that, you know okay, so let's take an example of the North Node for me is moving towards self. That could take so many different forms, isn't it? So it's not to say that being married is right, not being married is right, having being in the city is right, being in the country is right. It's not that, is it?
No.
It's the energy towards the truth in what you're doing is still moving towards self. Whatever the kind of materialism around that looks like is kind of irrelevant. The energy is moving towards self, and that's the truth that we want to be working with. And so that's been, I mean, hugely important for me, and we've had many discussions around. I'm very happy to use these examples to try and exemplify these quite intangible subjects for people to make them more tangible. So, for me, definitely owning the studio, for example, okay, within that, there are so many battles that come with that. So even though I feel like, yes, that is me on path, on purpose, that in truth, I'm like, that is what I want to do. I want to give back and I want to teach people about yoga. And so I feel this like duty. I feel this obligation to do that. However, on paper, it makes no sense whatsoever, because the truth is, with a yoga studio, unless you're teaching kind of 90% of the classes yourself, like your costs of getting other teachers to teach are so high that it's a really difficult business model to make work. And on paper, basically, it's making no money for me personally, but it is creating yoga and it is doing the thing that I want to share in the world. So many people have said to me over the years, obviously, just shut it down. Like, it's taking up 3 to 4 days of your working week, which you pay for your kids to be in nursery for, and it's not making you personally any money. What are you doing? And I'm like, I don't know. I can't shut it down. So when it's come to like contract renewals and rent renewals and doubles of rent and VAT and all this is when I have to sit there, and this is when I picked up the phone to Becky and been like, come on, man, like help me through this, because everything is pointing me away from keeping it going, and yet my heart, like I can't stop. And so it's not to say that even when you're living on purpose that it's just going to be plain sailing. you know
Mm.
it's like there's still going to be battle, but it's just going to feel right. It's going to feel like right battle rather than wrong battle, I guess, is the best way I can explain it. And it's forced me to figure it out, to learn about business, to learn about, how I can keep that going. And so yeah, without knowing that my South Node was that forced caregiver. And I still actually, that's what I feel like I'm doing with the studio in a funny way. I'm caregiving, but to a
Yeah.
community.
That's the
Uh,
point, one of the points I was going to make, actually. Yeah, like the thing is with the South Node, you know what the nodes are in the birth chart are two opposite points to they form a polarity for everyone wherever they are. So yours is about like giving to others in your South Node, but really like self-actualizing at a personal level is where your soul wants to go. But you can't walk away from the South Node. Like it calls to be integrated. And so it's not like, you know that you're drawn to doing this stuff for yourself, but you can't walk away and leave that South Node because you're not integrating it. You're not learning the lessons. You're not alchemizing it, which is exactly why, the universe sends you a husband with another child, with a baby, that you didn't plan for. And then it makes, running a studio really hard because it's saying like, you've got to alchemize this, you've got to integrate this and learn the lessons from it because it's going to make you better at the North Node. It's going to make you appreciate how, yeah, it's not all about you. It is about you, but it isn't because you've got those gifts as well. From what the South Node also brings is like gifts and talents, and so you're naturally very good at making people feel safe. It was what makes you an amazing yoga teacher and teacher trainer. I know everyone who will have been on your training is going to have experienced that. And so like it's not leaving it behind, and yeah, you're continuing to have to like alchemize that, but you'll probably find like over the years it's going to get less and less and less like the need to caregive in that way because you've learnt the lessons, and it's kind of something then that you automatically do without having to be forced to face major lessons. So
it's just the
yeah.
knowing though, the astrology giving you the knowing of like, yeah, this is what you're here to do. It just takes the sting out of it for me. It's just like, okay, yeah, there's that feeling again, and then I'm here to learn from it. And some days I'm like, God damn it, and other days I'm like, no, I'm doing this. And
Yeah.
like I think being a stepmom in the early days I found really, really hard. Now, like I love it. I do, I love it. Of course there are moments that are difficult, like there are with your own children. But I think when you can start to work through this stuff and you really work through the challenge, you don't avoid them, like you feel so damn proud of yourself. Like how many times have I spoken to insolvency agency? How many times have Adam said to me, like, give it up? And here I am, it's thriving, like, and the other areas of the business have never been more successful. And, my kids are now kind of grown up. Say grown up, it's only one and three. But
Right now.
they're not like, I'm not breastfeeding them anymore, for example. Like, I feel like I'm really out the thick of it. And I don't think, well, I would have done somehow. We do, don't we, as humans? But it would have been so much harder to get through that without that knowledge of like, it's okay. Yeah, it's hard. It's supposed to be hard, but you know where you're going and you're on purpose.
Yeah, I just had a moment there when you said your kids were grown up. I was like, yeah, tell me you're a Capricorn without telling me you're a Capricorn. Because
Oh
that is
God.
so Capricorn. So funny.
We
Um,
joke, don't we, about and I bet that also, yeah, so there's North Node and South Node, and then so Capricorn being my star sign or my sun sign, is that the goat hanging onto the side of the mountain, right? And like I loved what you said to me, I can't remember a couple months ago, and it was like, Laura, you need challenge. You're a Capricorn. Like I won't feel like purposeful unless I've got some challenge going on because I'm a goat trying to climb up to the top of the mountain, right? That rung so true. And like, we have our teachers' WhatsApp group, don't we? But they'll be like, there's a bird in the studio, there's been a car crash, there's this, there's like all the drama constantly. Like, what do we do? What do we do? And I just send Becky a picture of the goat, like, I'm still hanging on. But we can laugh at it right now. I can laugh at it. Whereas before it'd be like, why me? Didn't I used to say to you, like, why does all this stuff always bloody happen to me? And now I'm like, yeah, bring it on. Not always. Be careful what you wish for. Oh
I,
God. But yeah. But so tell me about yours then, Beck. So how does this manifest for you?
so in a way, So your south node is in your seventh house and your north node is in your first house. And mine is the same axis. However, my south node is in, yours is in Cancer, which is where this caregiving comes from. And mine is in Pisces. So my north node's in my first house of Virgo. So for me, the seventh house is also about like marriage and relationship. And Pisces is the sign of spirituality, mysticism, dreaming. And so for me, I think in previous lifetimes, there's been like a real safety in partnership and probably being suppressed in partnership as well. But also, like, probably living quite a religious past life at some point as well, like being so committed to God and spirituality that I didn't share it with anyone, you know,
Mm.
like having that one-to-one relationship with God, spirit, the universe, whatever you want to call it. And if we're talking about history, it's more than likely have going to been religious because, you know, that people are sort of moving away from being religious now, but being spiritual. So yeah, so for me, what how that has actually shown up in my life is very early on, like searching for partnership and thinking that my purpose was in meeting and being in union with somebody else. So I have that. I met my husband, I was like 18, 19, and we've been together ever since. So it's like that real safety, being safe and thinking that was my dream, Pisces. And then also, even in business and my work, like I've been in the same construction business for like all of my adult life. And, you know, that has evolved into a partnership with someone. And there's real safety for me in that. But what there also is in both of those relationships is a certain amount of me not stepping fully into who I am because I'm so meeting their needs and so defined by them. So, you know, I talked about this, I think, on episode 1, where I had this calling to do my yoga teacher training. And that happened when, for me, in my chart, we have like these key moments in our chart when things get activated. And this was an activating point for me when I look back on it. I didn't know astrology to the extent I know it now then. And doing my yoga teacher training was the first step towards that of like, who am I? Who am I underneath these relationships? And so I did that. And I realize as I've done that, like what I'm here to do is integrate those spiritual gifts that Pisces gives me. Because people always say to me, like, how do you pick up astrology like so fast? And, you know, like the amount of spiritual concepts that I can hold. And I'm not saying that in a braggy way at all, but I'm like, it's just the gift of having a Pisces South Node because I knew it and I've relearned it. And you know, it's just like doing a quick refresher for me. And it feels like so integrated in my body that I just know it. And then the Virgo energy in my first house is, yes, the first house is about self, but Virgo is about being of service, is its highest expression. So I now realize how it's like, yes, knowing how to relate to people and using those spiritual gifts, how can I use that to self actualize myself, but also use that to be of service to other people? And there are other things in my chart that you know, kind of really add to that as well. I've got Jupiter in my 11th house, and it's exalted in Cancer. And Cancer is the sign of nurturing. 11th house is the sign of community, and Jupiter is like amplification. So the more that I give to community and to groups of people, whether that's like in my day job now, you know, or, you know, through the other work that I'm doing with yoga and astrology, that to me then is just an overspilling of, you know, this essence within me. And I bring, you know, now, like I can't leave that part of me behind, and it comes into every conversation. Like I don't seem to be able to have like a shallow conversation anymore. So yeah.
And that's what, you know, something that we were talking about is that the shallow world that we can live in now, and quite a fake world, really, I think, and that's just my personal thoughts on it. But, there is so much fakery around, isn't there? How we look. I mean, even look at, AI now. I mean, what's real, what is true, and what isn't true. And can you just share a bit more on where we are at in terms of our kind of the life cycle of the world as well?
Yeah, so like astrologically right now at the time we're recording this, it's we're at a key point in a cycle for Earth. And so when we think about purpose as like our personal purpose, that's one aspect of purpose. But we're also like here massively to evolve things for the whole planet and the collective. So, I think it's always important to have that there as well, because we also have become very disconnected and self-centered with purpose, when purpose is way bigger than that. But yeah, where we are in the 26,000 year cycle of Earth is so, yeah, how to start with this really. So 13,000 years ago, we would have been at a point when Earth was closest to the seat of Brahma, which is the seat of consciousness. And it was really easy for people on Earth to find morality, to have this sense of Dharma and purpose. And of course, like none of this is recorded. It's before recorded history, but this is a concept actually that is in many of the texts that we share on the teacher training that then I've chosen to go and research a little bit deeper. That, yeah, 26,000 years ago, we had this automatic connection to purpose and Dharma and truth because of the position of where Earth was to the seat of Brahma. And we have this thing called the precession of the equinoxes, which means up until very recently, we've been at the point where Earth is furthest from the seat of Brahma, the seat of truth. And God, we see that in the world. We're so far from morality in terms of war. How can we be talking about like such superficial things like Lululemon leggings when there's bloody famine and war going on in the world? It's crazy to me. So we've come so far away from what truth and morality is, and we think it's something completely different. We've all forgotten that we're these spiritual souls in human bodies having a human experience, and kind of in a way like that's kind of the natural cycle of these 26,000 year cycles. And yoga, astrology, these were all technologies that were developed as we fell from truth and dharma and at the golden age, and they were developed in the silver age when there were still people of high enough consciousness to say, hold on a minute, what's happening here? People are falling from truth. We better develop some technologies, some strategies to allow people at some point to reconnect with their truth. And of course, yeah, people then practice yoga for thousands of years. But what we saw, I guess, in more recent history is then that was sort of very much just in India, which we know is the birthplace of yoga. And, it was only brought into the West, like relatively recently, really. We talk about Indra Devi, don't we, on the training, and how she brought it to Los Angeles and things like that, and almost that's in living memory. And so yoga and astrology are these practices that have been designed by people who were of higher consciousness when consciousness was falling, in order to help us re-emerge from the other side. And I think we've just about passed the point now where we're like the furthest point away, and we're starting to move back towards truth, towards these kind of spiritual understandings. And we're seeing that, right? We're seeing this in the resurgence of people taking up yoga, and doing yoga teacher training and astrology. People are realizing how far from truth we are. We're becoming more connected to the seasons. So yeah, that's kind of like where we are right now. And we have some key transits that are happening in the next couple of years that are really going to push us in that direction. And we chose to come right now. We chose to be incarnated now and experience this.
And this ties in so perfectly with the whole idea of having a gift, because we have chosen to be here at this point and we have a gift to give at this point. And I feel like part of mine is that is truth, is sharing truth and helping people find their own truth, you know, and we do that through different ways. And I think maybe people listening to this would be like, yeah, that's great. I want to do that. But how do I do that? And this is, you know, these are all the techniques that we use on the teacher training, and imagining ourselves as like an onion. We've got these layers and it's like peeling them back and doing the exercises like, who am I? You know, writing down all the things that you think you are and then putting a line through the ones which are just titles and not really you. And then finding out who you really are, you know, at your core and at your essence. And I think practicing yoga is so like misunderstood and also undervalued. You know, people think that it's basically to stretch your body. But for me, the truth, to find out who you really are, yoga is one of the best ways of doing that, because you're confronted with so much challenge all the time, but you're in a really safe place. So, you know, when you're presented a yoga pose, and like we spoke about before, you know, either you hold yourself back because that lie is coming up, you know, that limiting belief of like, I'm not good enough, I'm not strong enough, I'm too young, I'm too old, whatever it might be, that limiting belief, which is just circling around and determining your life and holding you back, that is your lie, you know. Or if you feel like you have to push yourself too hard because you're trying to please other people, like, why are you doing that? Whose life are you living, right? And hopefully if you can be in a class where someone's asking you these questions, it's one of the best places to start, you know, bringing those, as we call them, samskaras, those deeply trodden pathways into the light, so that you can start to shed light on them, see truth, and then make change. And that's, I think, when we really see the transformation in people, when they're starting to figure out basically who they are on a really, on a deeper level. And this is why I find it really hard. And sometimes I think there probably is something wrong with me, you know, I don't know. But wrong with me or right with me, I'm not sure what's wrong or right. But I really struggle, you can imagine, and you've probably seen it with like superficial conversation now, you know, like you, like it has to be deep, and that's probably too much for a lot of people. But you know, I find it so, oh God, you bump into someone, you know, on the beach, oh hi, how's this, how's that, you know, isn't it? And I'm like, "Ugh." I know we have to do that. I know we have to
Yeah.
have that conversation to be normal. But like, come on, what's really going on? Like, what's actually happening in your life? Where are you holding yourself back? I'm so intense. Like,
Yeah.
but that's, let's work with truth, because otherwise, what the hell are we doing? Like, what is the point? And this is where I just cannot stand. And this is, I struggle with things like this in family, and obviously, you know, family kind of irritate us the most because they're the closest to us, right? So they, but like gossiping about other people, I'm like, come on, are we not? We're all older than that. Surely we're all wiser than that. Like, what's the point in gossiping about somebody? They're basically, and I know this is very Buddhist, but someone's just confused. They're only confused and they need help. They just need support and they need some truth. So gossiping about them is not going to help. And I just have like no time for it. You know, I just, and all this, I don't know, like the tabloids and the and celebrities. I'm like, is celebrities important? I mean, unless they're doing something really bloody cool like Indra Devi, like I just don't, I don't get it. I don't, it's this like the superficial world, which I know is the game we should all be playing, or I don't know, is the game that everyone is playing generally. But it just feels so far from, as you say, truth and what matters, what's important, which is surely just helping everybody self actualize so they can give the gift that they're really here to do, to actually change the world in a proper way, you know?
Yeah, I all of that 100% is been my journey as well. And I think also you talked about yoga as being this amazing pathway to bring you back because of the challenge. But the other thing that yoga did for me is it brings you into a state of observation as well. That, hold on a minute, I can observe my body. So therefore, how can I be my body if I'm like able to witness it and feel it? Like, that's a different perspective. And then, okay, I can watch my thoughts. Okay, so I can't be whatever the thoughts are in my brain, which, as you can imagine, is a pretty crazy place. And everyone's brain is crazy. So once you can make that disconnect, if I'm not my body and I'm not my mind, who am I? it's another pathway where you realize, yeah, I'm also not just, a mother, or, this role that I hold in a business, or, you're something far greater than that. And I kind of wanted to touch on reincarnation actually, because we're talking about it like, yeah, we've got these past lives and they mean all these things. And whereas for some people, like, they're just like, no, I don't resonate with that. Can't possibly think about reincarnation as a possibility. And I think the moment you open up to realizing like your spirit is like energy that just never, is unending, it can't be created or destroyed, and you put that science into, okay, that must apply to me, then I don't know, I feel like it majorly upgrades your like your DNA and your ability to connect with like these spiritual concepts that we're talking about. And even if reincarnation doesn't resonate for you, like, that's fine. You can see it as, I'm being born with a certain amount of gifts, and my duty is to expend those gifts in the world. But I think it's worth thinking about, if you think about energy, like, think about how a baby, when it's born, or maybe it's a puppy or a kitten, like, if you don't have children, but they are born with a certain personality, they're animated in a certain way. So what has happened before they were born to make them animated in that particular way? Like, that isn't how, like, the more you think about those things, the truth, the closer it brings you back to the truth of who you are. And then, like, quantum physics, so we know to have a baby, like, the sperm and the egg have to come together at a biological level, right? That's how it happens. But what happens at an energetic level then? Because what makes this embryo, this fetus, have the life force energy and consciousness of its own? The more we can ask those deeper questions, that we're kind of distracted by celebrity and Instagram and all of these things, so that we don't think about that stuff. Because if we don't think about that stuff and realize like our energy is unending, and it's okay to take risks, because your soul wants to take risks, it wants to do the hard thing to evolve you, we're not controllable then. And yeah, like, I just think that's a huge concept. And that's about life. We're not encouraged to think about those things, but we're also discouraged so much from talking about death, right? Everybody fears death, but if you can relate to it instead as energy that continues, you can start getting comfortable with death before it happens. And again, this is like a practice of yoga. We start on the mat, don't we? Often in a child's pose is the journey to Shavasana, corpse pose, and we roll over and we get up and we start again. Like, that is what yoga is preparing us for.
I think you're so right on all of this, and also right to say that people will feel resistant towards some of this chat, as I totally would have done, and at times still do, because it's stuff that we don't talk about on a day-to-day basis, normally.
Oh, we
But I
do,
think
but
yeah, but I mean, other humans. Um, so, but my question is always like, are you happy? Are
mm,
you suffering in some way? Because, like, what's going to fix that? I promise you, it's unlikely to be medication. And I know we've all tried. A lot of alcohol does it temporarily, drugs and all the rest of it. It's not sustainably going to work. And in yoga, like, this for me relates perfectly as you're talking. I'm like, it's the kleshas, it's the kleshas. The kleshas are the poisons, the toxins of the mind. And this is what causes us suffering. They are the cause of suffering. And if we can become aware of these things and then notice them and realize what is and isn't good for us, then we can remove that suffering. So look, let's really simplify this. The first one, so avidya, is ignorance. So avidya is said to be like the trunk of the tree of suffering. So if you think of spiritual ignorance, Okay, which is exactly what we're talking about, like, oh, spirituality. Okay, well, spiritual ignorance is the trunk of the tree of suffering. So if you can cut that one down, then you're unlikely to feel the effect of suffering of the other poisons on the tree. Okay, it's essentially just ignorance to spirituality. It's exactly what we're saying in terms of life and death, thinking that this is it, that this is the only life that we have, you know, that energy isn't real, that spirituality isn't real. And all of that now, I find that so hard to believe when I'm like, you know, I walked down the beach this morning and I'm looking at the waves and they're nuts. And I'm like, that's crazy. That's because of the moon. You know, there's an energy, right? It's the same thing. We believe in tears, we believe in laughter. That's energy. It's energy in motion. Energy is a really real thing and it's connected to something much bigger. The planets are real. It is all connected. It's all a really real thing. But if we can start to really embrace spirituality in that way and not be afraid of it, then we're gonna, you know, basically prevent ourselves from feeling so much of the effects of the other causes of suffering. The second one, which I think is so important, and this was a big one for me, is a Smita. And when I read this, I was in my 20s, right? And it was very much me centric. And I think we look at millennials and millennial suffering, and it's all about this I-ness. And this is what is causing so much suffering. So it's basically the more I make the world about me, the more stressful life becomes, right? That's a Smita. And how much do we see that? You know, everybody worrying, you know, what do I look like? What size is my body? You know, what do I own? What car do I have? Like, how well are my children doing? Like, all this, like, all about me. That is so stressful and is such a confusion. You know, that is just obviously when you're looking at people like that, you're getting very confused that that is not what the world is about. Um, and is a poison of the mind, a smita. Raja is attachment, so attachment to like the things that we desire, to pleasure. You know, this is where we can see this, like maybe overeating, over shopping, like the wanting. And Robbie Williams, I loved it in his documentary. He was like, I was a want monster. For me, that's
Um,
that. That's like just the wanting that we have, which causes so much suffering because it's endless and it causes craving. Devesha, which is the opposite of Raja. So this is like an aversion to unpleasant stuff. So just only wanting the nice things, you know, like not going through like suffering things that, you know, we need to grow from. And then Abhinvesha, which is this it's about the fear of death, isn't it? Which is what you're talking about, you know? And trying, they say, you know, we can only really make peace with life when we make peace with death. So all of the things that we're talking about here are basically the kleshas. They are the poisons of the mind. And this is what, when studying yoga and knowing that there are 8 limbs of yoga, and it's not just about doing a stretch class, because that's just one, that's the asana, then there is so much that we can gain from it and transform, you know, in a way that is really worthwhile.
yeah, there's just so much richness, isn't there? Um, and yeah, I was thinking while you were talking about like how really everything in this human experience is about balancing polarity and duality, and we see that in the yin yang symbol that is so ancient. It's one of the technologies just in that symbol that was developed to highlight the very challenges that we're going to face now. And I mean, we see this in astrology with the trying to integrate the south node and move in the opposite direction to your north node. But we see it with male female dynamics. And I know we're going to do an episode about relationships, but we see it there. And we see it with like even attachment and things like that. Like practicing yoga and things like that, I think you've probably been down this path as well, where you kind of move away from, okay, like I don't need those things, but then you're no longer appreciating the richness of the human experience and life and all the things, when it's really about, yes, like have the things, but don't be attached to them. Don't feel like that is the be all and end all and it's going to make you happy, because it isn't. It might temporarily fuel, you know, this desire to want things for a very short period of time, but it doesn't last. And so it's like what we've got to try and transcend is like this either or mentality. It's like, yeah, I'm either a mother or I'm a career woman. Okay, like how do I do both? um yeah, how can I
It's
have
bloody
nice
hard.
things? It's bloody hard, yeah, but not be attached to them and not believe like that is everything. So yeah, I was just like really feeling that around polarity while you were chatting anyway.
It's so true. There's so much wisdom in that. And I think I always think it's quite cute in a way. Us humans is like when we start practicing these things, we often swing, don't we? And I can see it from myself. We go from one end of the spectrum to the other end of the spectrum. So I know like at some point we'll do something on appearance because it's a big topic, isn't it? Weight, Botox, makeup, whatever. Like this is
Aging,
stuff that
yeah,
people
all of the things.
all of the things. I remember when I first did my yoga teacher training and I'd come from that city job, I was quite blonde and, I was doing all my fit and my spin and all of this. And then I was like, right, that's it. And I became so purist and was like, never going to dye my hair. I'm never going to wear makeup. I'm not even going to shave anymore. It's just like, whoa. I went one end of the spectrum because I was kind of playing with that. I was going from one extreme to the other. And then I think in your kind of wisdom and actually just kind of settling down a little bit and going, yeah, no, this is who I am and this feels right for me. And that's going to be different for everyone. But it, as you say, it just really not mattering, basically, that stuff not being important either way, however it ends up. But having kind of explored it and done the work and not kind of sleepwalking through life, but just making conscious decisions about what feels right for you, doesn't matter what the outcome of that is, as long as it is truthfully right for you.
Mm.
Okay, so for people listening to this and wanting to maybe get more in touch with truth and authentic way of living, what would be your best advice, Beck?
I feel like definitely coming back to the body and starting to feel the truth in the body because it doesn't come from the mind, right? And we've talked about this concept a little bit, I think, on one of the other episodes of like following the breadcrumbs that are presented to you. Like, if I'd never done my yoga teach training, would I be talking about all this stuff now? Probably not. So yeah, coming back to the breadcrumbs, and some people come for readings and they're like, "Tell me, what is my purpose?" And yeah, we can interpret the birth chart, but the truth is, like the bigger vision that whatever spirit, your higher self, the universe has potentially in store for you, like wouldn't make sense in that moment. Because if someone had said to me, if I'd gone for a reading when I was 25 and someone said, okay, so right, you are going to have a family, but actually your purpose is going to be around integrating spiritual teachings that you've had in past lives and then teaching those to other people, I'd have been like, what are you even talking about? Like, I'm not into spirituality. I don't believe in reincarnation, and all I want is to have a baby. So it's crap. Like, so you can't be presented with the whole picture of what you're meant to do in one go. Like, that's not how it works. And also, what would be the point? Because we could all just like read our birth chart age 10 and be like, okay, so I'm meant to do this thing. I understand that now. And like, what would be the point of life? The point of life is the struggle. It is the difficulty and the challenge that we face as we move towards our purpose. And that is what Earth School is all about. And apparently there's a cue to come down here and be in a human body because yeah, just like having that physical experience and crying real tears and feeling real love in a physical body is something to be like cherished.
Yeah, so wise. I remember watching something once around the question was like, would you rather not exist or would you rather exist in this life? And it was the idea that like, yeah, I choose to exist and I choose to experience all the deepest, darkest emotions that humans are capable of experiencing, and all the depth of the love and the pleasure and the excitement and everything in between. Because what roller coaster, right? And what a privilege to be able to experience those depth of emotions and live in this life, in this human body. So yeah, you're right. Follow the breadcrumbs, trust, and I guess just absorb every emotion on the way as well, right?
Yeah, like what you just said really again is speaking to polarity. You know, we what we signed up for was to experience everything, like horrible grief, but then, you know, joy and deep love. And both are different sides of the same coin, aren't they? Because if you didn't know what grief and sadness felt like, how could you have a framework to know what joy and love feels like? You know, so it's a key part of why we're here is to understand that polarity and work with it and play with it.
I just want to read you something that I came across the other day, and it was exactly about this. Let me just find it. So this was basically written by a father. I'll reference it. So it was from Bob Perks, but written by a father who was saying goodbye to his daughter, and he knew that he was never going to see her again. And when they said goodbye, they both said, "I wish you enough." And there was a woman who was an onlooker and said, "Can I ask, like, what does that mean?" And he said, "Oh, it's something, a wish that's been passed down by generations. I wish you enough sun to keep your attitude bright. I wish you enough rain to appreciate the sun. I wish you enough happiness to keep your spirit alive. I wish you enough pain so that the smallest joys in life appear bigger. I wish you enough gain to satisfy your wanting. I wish you enough loss to appreciate all that you possess. I wish you enough hellos to get you through the goodbyes."
Mm,
And it's
yeah.
that, it's these polarities that we need. We need all of it, you know, enough of both of it to help us appreciate it all, right?
Mm, I think that's a beautiful way to end.
Yeah. Okay, and so next time we are going to be looking into relationships,
Yes.
and this will be a juicy one. So, yeah, romantic relationships, family relationships, and yeah, probably the male female role because we've both got a lot to say about that, right?
Yeah, it could be a long episode, couldn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Get comfy.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode. Your time is precious, and we truly appreciate you spending it with us. We look forward to having you join us again soon. So, take care, and we'll catch you in the next episode.